Hi, it's Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com, dwyervip.com. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Well, they had the 30 days before the fight weigh-in. Understand that at that 30-day weigh-in, you cannot legally weigh more than 10% above the fighting weight, right? The Brook Golovkin fight is at middleweight, 160 pounds. So the most either guy could weigh would be 10% of 160, 16 pounds, plus the 160. In other words, the most you're allowed to weigh to be legal is 176 pounds. Right? That's the most. Incredibly, Brook came in. Brook, the welterweight champion. Welter's 147. Brook came in and weighed 176 pounds. Right? 176. By contrast, Golovkin, the middleweight champion, weighed 165 pounds. More importantly, for our purposes, they're photos of the guys on the scale, right? There's a photo of Brook. Brook is just wearing a brief. When you look at the photo, you're going to notice Brook's abs, right? In other words, this isn't a guy who has a pot belly that he needs to work off the last 30 days, right? Because he's going to have to lose 16 pounds. 16 to make weight, right? 16 pounds. Well, understand, Brook, when you look at him, doesn't look flabby. He looks sculpted. In my opinion, this development is a disaster for Brook. Don't be a gambler fooled by this. Don't be the guy who says, hey, this proves that Brook is really a middleweight. This proves that Brook is the same size as Golovkin. In my opinion, it literally proves something far worse if you're a Brook guy. It proves that he's going to have to find a way before the weigh-in to lose 16 pounds on a body that looks sculpted. If the guy's keeping himself in shape and he's walking around at 176 pounds, folks, the rest of his camp is not going to be focused on strategy to beat Golovkin. No, the rest of his camp is going to be focused on the sauna, right? Melting pounds, laxatives, things like that. Biggest fight of his career. And the guy can't even focus on his opponent. Let me go one step further. Golovkin, by contrast, 165. I'm guessing he could lose the 5 pounds in his sleep. Right? The Golovkin side of the ledger, fighting at middleweight, that's not new to him. Right? He's dealt with middleweight opponents in real fights. Right? I don't care what size Brook is. Brook's accustomed to getting hit by welterweights. Right? Welters, not middles. So, Golovkin, for example, he fought former champion Daniel Gill. He fought Marco Antonio Rubio. These are guys with big punches. Look at their records. Right? Rubio gave David Lemieux his first loss. David Lemieux, that's another guy Golovkin's fought. Right? Golovkin also fought Matthew Macklin. In other words, Golovkin has fought rough and tumble guys. Guys accustomed to doling out punishment at middleweight. Right? Golovkin's accustomed to getting hit, or at least being in the ring opposed by middleweights. Now, I don't care if Kell Brook walks around at a higher weight than Golovkin. Kell Brook doesn't have that background, not in real fights. Let me go one step further. You know, when a guy gains weight for a fight, to me that's perilous. Right? Kell Brook's biggest advantage, in my opinion, over Golovkin is his hand speed. Right? Isn't the feeling that Kell Brook is faster than Golovkin? We'll throw in foot speed. How do you know at the higher weight that Kell Brook is going to have an advantage on either? Don't you want Kell Brook at his best? Folks, the extra weight is going to feel like luggage. Right? You don't want Kell Brook handicapped in any way for this fight. The casinos already have him as a big-time underdog. And you mean to tell me that rather than move up in weight class the way Floyd Mayweather did to fight Oscar De La Hoya, what I want people to do is to look at the official weights from that fight. You're going to see that Oscar De La Hoya outweighed Floyd. Floyd understood speed was one of his advantages. Right? Floyd didn't gain the weight to get to 154 pounds. Just like Sugar Ray Robinson didn't gain the weight to get to light heavyweight when he fought Joey Maxim. Because when you're a speed guy and that's your competitive advantage, right, you don't want to weigh down that speed by having a lot of weight on you. Let's go one step further. For those of you who think Kell Brook's going to go the distance in this fight, right? Think about the later rounds. There are fights where Kell Brook looked like he wilted a little bit. That first Carson Jones fight, we'll name names, in the later rounds, right? Kell Brook looked like he was being walked down a bit. Well, here, just in terms of stamina, if you were to have to box 12 rounds, would you want to do so in your normal weight, slender, what you're accustomed to? Or would you want to come in the ring heavy like this guy's going to? Right? I'm telling you, the extra weight might well make Kell Brook sluggish. Right? Sluggish in the ring. So to me, I honestly don't get it. Who fights Golovkin and then decides they're going to put themselves in a position where they have to lose 16 pounds in 30 days? Who does that? Let me go one step further. Because 176 was the absolute maximum either fighter could weigh at this weigh-in, how do we know how much Kell Brook weighed before he worked his way down to 176? Right. This is preposterous. It's preposterous. I'll go one step further. I was raised in the 70s when people talk trash. Right? In fact, NBA fans watching this video probably remember the 80s and 90s when people like Gary Payton in the NBA talk trash. Hell, everybody in the NBA talk trash. Trust me, I have no problem with guys talking trash, particularly not in boxing. Right? Good trash talk, hell, that helps sell fights. Isn't that part of the culture? right? Guys sit down. Now you have these face-to-face things, and the gloves are off, and guys sit down, and, they're going to tell the other guy, look, I'm better than you. Right? You're making a mistake fighting me. The belt I have that you want, you're not going to get. Right? I don't have a problem with trash talkers. But I do have a problem with the truly delusional. Right? There's a difference between a guy talking trash and you understand, hey, this is tongue-in-cheek. The guy knows he's in against a world-class opponent, right? In this case, Kell Brook knows he's in with an unbeaten middleweight champion, right? Who guys don't go the distance against. Right? One of the hardest punchers in boxing. But yet, Kell Brook in interviews has been saying things like, hey, I'm going to do whatever I want in the fight. Folks, that's not trash talk. that's not trash talk. That's a guy being delusional. A guy who's never fought a middleweight in a real fight in his life. Right? What? He thinks he's going to go in against Golovkin and do whatever he wants? Name me the opponent Golovkin has faced who's been able to do that for even 3 rounds. Right? I mean, when you're talking stuff like this, right? Either you know something the rest of us don't, or you are just delusional. I'm worried for Kell Brook. Looking at his body, I don't know where he's going to lose to 16 pounds to get to the 160. Listening to him talk, I'm wondering if he understands that even though he's a big puncher for a welterweight, Golovkin's been fighting 2 weight classes up against guys who are big punchers at middleweight. Right? I just don't get it, folks. Understand, too. It's not just about the weights. It's really the angles that'll decide this fight. Now, you saw a lion at middleweight. A guy who's a knockout puncher himself, David Lemieux, try to bum rush Golovkin. And Lemieux started running into Golovkin's jab, didn't he? Right, this was a guy who is physically bigger than Kell Brook. Right, he tried to roughhouse Golovkin. He ran into some of the tools that Golovkin has. Then, of course, Golovkin started teeing off. What I'd like to hear from the boxing press when they question Kell Brook is, what fight is Kell Brook looking at that tells him that his fate is going to be different than the fate of someone like David Lemieux, the fate of Macklin. Right? Think about that fight. Macklin covers up, folks. He's hit in the body. Fight's over. Daniel Gill. Right? What's the fight? And Kell Brook doesn't have to reveal this until right before the fight. Right? You know how they do it. The first round starts and the announcer says, hey, I spoke with Kell Brook before this fight. And Kell Brook said that this film, Golovkin, Kasim Uma, whatever, this film has led him to believe that he has a feasible plan to beat Golovkin. Right? I really wonder what he's going to do here. Does he think, how does a Kell Brook who doesn't fight inside when he's at welterweight against smaller opponents? Is Kell Brook now 2 weight classes up, thinking he's going to fight inside? And by the way, I do feel that's his only way to win the fight. Does he really feel that he's going to be able to fight inside against Golovkin? And if he plans to move around the ring and fight an outside fight, using his legs, how's this extra weight gonna help him? Aren't his legs gonna be dealing with a lot of extra pounds? as they move his body around the ring. Right? Let me just close by saying this. Don't be surprised if Kell Brook fails to make 160 pounds. Right? Because again, I'm looking at the photos here. Right? I'm seeing huge thigh muscles. You already see his abs and stuff like that. Where's he going to lose the weight from? Right? Where is he going to lose the weight from? Right? Don't be surprised if he misses weight. And then Golovkin says, hey, I'll fight you anyway. Because, of course, if you're the first man to beat Golovkin, even if you do so with a few extra pounds, fans in boxing will remember you. But I'll just say, count me among those completely unimpressed by Kell Brook's 176 pounds 30 days before the fight. Right? If I believed Kell Brook had a chance in this fight, I would hope he would be either below 160. Right? That would tell me, hey, he still has the speed that I saw him with at 147. Right? Or close to 160. This way I would think, okay, well, guy doesn't have to worry about weight in this training camp. He can actually focus on the opponent. He can spend hours looking at films. Right? Finding out what he has to do, because wasn't he, in fact, a last-minute replacement for this fight? Right? Isn't the folklore that Chris Eubank Jr. was about to sign, and then Kell Brook steps in and says, hey, I'll take the deal. Right? So, don't be fooled by the sizes of the guys. Only one of these guys has fought hard hitters at middleweight in real fights. Right? Only one. And that person's not Kell Brook. Right? Anyway, that's how I see it. Let me hear from you. Let me say this too. You show me a guy who rehydrates and has to gain a lot of weight. Right? Has to lose a lot of weight to make weight and then gains a lot of weight afterwards. And I'll show you a guy who's going to break down in his early 30s. You remember Ricky Hatton? Right? You remember Julio Cesar Chavez Jr.? Yes, I'm even talking about him in the past tense. Right? These guys who are artificially draining their bodies 15, 20 pounds to make weight. Are you listening, fans of Saul Alvarez? That party only works when you're in your physical prime in your 20s. Right? If you don't figure out the discipline of keeping yourself near weight, even when you're not fighting, that's going to reveal itself in its 30s. Right? I'm just saying. Let me say this too. I've seen some guys magically make weight for a fight. Antonio Tarver, for the Bernard Hopkins fight at light heavyweight, and then be dead in the fight. It took so much for them to make weight that they just couldn't fight. Right? Antonio Tarver these days is either a cruiserweight, right? That's where he fought Danny Green, or a heavyweight. Right? I believe he fought Latif Coyote at heavy. Right? He was kidding himself, draining himself down to 175 where he was once champ. Well, Kell Brook right now at 176, if this is the range at which he walks around, he wasn't going to stay at welter long, was he? How many of those welterweight fights were the result of a guy artificially draining himself to make 147, a guy who should have been fighting at 160 a long time ago? Well, now he's going to fight at 160, and he's going to find out that he doesn't have the experience at 160 that the unbeaten middleweight champion has. Right? Let's just say I'm unimpressed hearing that Kell Brook weighed 176 30 days before the fight. If anything, in my opinion, this this gives Kell Brook even less of a chance to win this match, given that Golovkin wasn't foolish enough to weigh 176 himself. Given that Golovkin more intelligently came in at 165, looks to be in tip-top shape, can actually focus on strategy in his camp. Anyway, that's the way I see it. Let me hear from you. It is a blockbuster fight. It is happening, obviously, within 30 days. Let me hear from you. Let's hear your thoughts. I'm just not a big believer in yo-yo weights for fighters. Right? I've seen too many guys show up dead for the bout, like Tarver did. Let me go one step further. Your punch resistance drops rapidly when in a matter of 36 hours, you've lost 15 pounds to make weight, and then you go back and gain 15 pounds. In other words, your body goes on a 30-pound odyssey, right? I'm just here to tell you that those are the fighters who get seriously hurt in the ring. Gerald McClellan, Nigel Benn. You remember that fight in an earlier generation. Anyway, that's how I see it. Let me hear from you. I hope you leave your comments for me here in the comment section to this video. Thanks for stopping by.